Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. I almost hate to ask anyone how they're doing these days, but it is to be expected when we're in a war. And I am in captivity but enjoying it very much, and today I'd like to share with you my teacup, and it's from Meritage, and I got it at Home Goods, TJ Maxx, a long time ago when we were out. And I would like to tell you that these are not expensive, but they have such a beautiful look. They're very sturdy, and you can all have something like this when you go there. And I'd like to welcome you all to Homemakers Radio and hope that you get a few things done while you listen. If you're looking at this on YouTube on my channel, please click the link in the description box and go over there to see the post and the outline and the pictures and the other things that I present there, and you may leave a comment. There aren't any comments on the channel here. And yesterday, or the previous video, I shared with you how to have an hour. I presented an hour of detox from the media, from, I guess, the dictator detox, I called it. Detox from all the dictation of the world that can worry you, and talked a little bit about anxiety. And I want to make sure that first thing, that's one of the reasons I say get dressed, get yourself ready, get yourself presentable to yourself, because and have a higher standard. I mean, you can say, well, I look okay to myself. I'm in t-shirts and sweats, and I look okay to myself. But we have to have something a little better than that to lift our spirits, to lift our minds and our mood. And I believe that that is one of the ways to detox yourself from the world. Be different. And one of the beauties of being a homemaker and being at home is you get to dress in a way that you thought maybe you had missed out on because you weren't born in that century. Well, you get to do what you want at home, and you can adapt your normal presentation of yourself to the styles that you have always longed, you wished it would come into style. And the only way to bring things back is to do it yourself. You don't have to wait. You were born for this time, but maybe you were born to show the best of a previous century. Who knows? I like to be in the Victorian era, although I don't dress Victorian at home. I dress Victorian inspired. And so while you're listening, maybe you'd like to go and get ready and get yourself scrubbed up, and I will talk to you a little bit. And of course, I am always trying to avoid talking about the politics, and I will probably let a few things slip, but I try to leave it on a high note for you. And one of the things that I'd like to emphasize is that when you're in a war and there's a common enemy and they're trying to restrict your movements, restrict your life even in the home, and make everyone so tense and feeling restricted and unable to live, one of the things that helps is your health. Having good health and having a good mental opinion of everything, just a healthy attitude is so helpful, and the mind and the body are so intricately connected. And that's why you should listen to Homemaking Radio, so that I can put you in a better mood maybe. And I have education today, so I'm going to read a few things from the books, but then I'm going to talk to you a little bit. And today, before you go, I would like to show you how to fold a letter, because I get letters, from my grandchildren, and they're all rolled up and folded up every which way, and I can't find the front of them. So I taught in a Thrive class on Zoom how to do this. You take your envelope and you put the paper a little bit shorter, so that it'll fit a little bit shorter, and you fold it to match this envelope. You fold it on the edges. You keep the edges even, that way it'll be even. And then you see I've folded that up. Wait a minute, wrong way. Folded that up, and then you take the top part where you with the address on it, with the greeting, and you fold it down like that. And then when the person takes it out of the envelope, they pull it out, and that will be the first thing that they see. I have dropped my envelope, but it goes in the envelope like this with the fold up in the envelope. And then when you open the envelope, that you pull this out, and this will greet you. You pull it up so that it's convenient. And this is all about being courteous and making it easy for people to read your letters, and so they don't have to fumble through and find the right side and get their pages right. So that is so important. And it was invented or created, a long time ago, maybe even 100 years ago, of how to do that because of the convenience of it. Now, I had an idea before we get started on the home and getting busy with going ahead and getting everything done that you need to be doing while you listen. I had an idea that maybe some of you have already had. Nothing is new under the sun. You'll be having an idea, and then pretty soon you'll see somebody writing about it online. And that is, if the powers that be decide to cut off all of our communication in this wonderful medium of the internet, which I believe God created for us too, a lot of people say, oh, it's wicked, all the phones are wicked, everything's wicked. But every era has things in it that are a great advantage to them, that helps them, and it's for good people as well. And it isn't just to be relegated to that area over there that is detrimental to us. We can use it for good. But if they cut off all these wonderful electronic ways, our texts, our videos, they cut us all off, it would be advisable first to go ahead and get some real addresses from people. Write them in your little notebook, and that way if you get cut off communication, you can write to them and keep up with it. But what if they decide that we're having too much fun using the post office to mail our letters, and they cut off our access to the post office? Okay, so here's another problem, and you need to think about this. And those of you who have children at home, you might want to give them this puzzle and ask them, what would you do as an alternative? The one thing that I could think of is what we used to do in the olden days. If someone was going somewhere on a trip, we would send a letter with them. And if it was a cousin or a friend, then they could deliver the letter. And this idea is called the courier. And we could send things through other people that were going to go up that way. There is a big problem that it might get lost. It might be piled up in someone's car or never get there. That is a problem, and that's one of the risks we take. But if anybody has any good ideas, there are alternatives, out there. There are commercial alternatives to the post office, and you need to know what they are so that you can keep in touch with people if you get completely cut off. Now, I want to also talk about the wearing of face coverings, or what do they call them? Suffocation devices. There are some people that just can't wear them, that will choke, that will faint. So I thought, I wonder if the Bible says anything about this, And of course, they don't want us to breathe this wonderful fresh air God gave us. And it's not natural to breathe back in your own air. It's actually toxic. It's quite dangerous. But I got to thinking about what the Bible would say about it, and I just kind of taking my mind through the, I go Genesis, Exodus, and I try to think of what would be in each one of this, and then I came across the Apostle Paul saying, thou shalt not muzzle the ox while it's treading the corn. And of course, I had heard many people discuss this in Bible classes on how the Apostle Paul was talking about if you have someone who's going to minister to you or teach you or preach something, that they ought to be given some kind of compensation for their time so that they don't go hungry. They ought to be paid. And the Old Testament times, in Moses' time, they had this law you shall not muzzle the ox while it's treading the corn. Well, the purpose of muzzling the ox was so that he wouldn't eat up so much corn while he was treading on it. And but it was really against the old law to do that, because a lot of the corn would fall and at the feet of the ox, and the ox should be eating it because it gave him strength to continue to walk around that mill. And so I can really understand it. So of course, if they're going to muzzle us, they're also preventing us from producing work and things that actually benefit the government. And if they're going to muzzle us all, then we're not going to be as helpful to people. We talked about being helpful last time. So I thought that that would be the only thing I could think of. And I don't know, but I think that we need to develop a sense of humor that is beneficial to us. And a lot of people didn't get that little saying that I put there about how I was in favor of mandatory vacations. A lot of people just didn't get it. I don't know why. When it was sent to me, the text said, please read carefully. So we need to develop a strong sense of humor, because the other side, the dictators, the ones that are pressuring us and pushing us around, have no sense of humor at all. And two things we have going for us. One is our health. If you can take care of your health, and you can be healthy. And the other thing is if you can laugh. These keep you alive, and the powers that be would rather that not happen. And so your health is of utmost importance. And remember, I told you what health was before. It's fresh air, lots of sleep, good food, good water, peaceful living, laughter. That is health. And that's the opposite of chemicals. You want to be really careful about chemicals, because chemicals in your body can deter good health. And you know the trouble with, let me just give you my little lecture here. Kids, the trouble with chemicals, medications, pharmaceuticals, prescriptions, is you'll get something else that someone says, well, you have high this or high that, and I'm trying to think of some of the things that we would have too much of or high of. So we're going to lower it with this drug. And the trouble is that those chemical, they're not natural, and those chemical medications do not have a brain. And so you can't program it to say, only take care of the liver, only take care of the blood. Don't go anywhere else. Don't touch anything else. And here's the problem. It's kind of like our U.S. Constitution. It is the go-to for the final word on every law that is presented to us to see if it's constitutional or legal. We'll go to the Constitution, and we can say to somebody in the Senate, well, you can't pass a law like that. It's unconstitutional because the Constitution says this, and it has to pass muster through the Constitution, the test of the Constitution. That's what it has to pass through. And if it doesn't equal what the Constitution says, you can't do it. And they would love and have been wanting to get rid of the Constitution for a long time. I can remember way back when a proposal was put, we were outraged. Now we're not outraged anymore. We just expected a suggestion, and a bill was put through the House of Representatives to get rid of the Constitution, and because it's dead and it's old and we need to write a new one. And of course, if we wrote a new one, it would not be with the same freedoms, because it would be written by the people that hate the original Constitution. They hate it that we use that as the final say in everything, and everything has to go through that. So then we have in our bodies that pesky Constitution is in their way. And we have in our bodies this pesky thing called the liver. And in homeschooling, we have books on anatomy and on health. So it's it's free for everyone to see, is available. The information is available, and you get to turn the pages and see the anatomy and see what the liver does and see what's beneath the skin and everything like that. And everybody learns that the liver is a very, very important and vital organ in the body, and everything you take, you eat, goes through that liver. And it goes through that and drips down into something else and into something else. It goes to the gallbladder, goes to the kidneys and stuff. And it filters through it so that everything that you take, medication, etc., goes through the liver and can cause liver problems. And almost every problem we have starts there. And that's why you need to be very careful to be natural and to eat the food and use the medicine that God prepared for us already on this earth, and not the chemical concoctions that man has prepared. Now, everybody understands that if you've had a health problem or an accident, that you might temporarily use something. But these days, they're not letting it stay temporary. They're wanting you to lower this and lower that with medication for your whole life. You never get off of it, and that goes into your liver, and then you start having other problems. And you may have an ache or a pain, and it is indicative of a liver problem. So we want to be really careful and have natural health. And that's one of the beauties of homeschooling, is that you can teach your children about what works for remedies. And instead of always looking for cures and remedies, look for good health in the first place so you won't need so many remedies. Things that prevent your nutrition, and learn about the herbs and what they can do, and learn about what natural foods, fruits and vegetables can do, and learn how to look after the body and include all kinds of things. I read you that book, the Jane Austen Diet, and had so much fun talking about the way they lived, just the strolls they took into town, and the tea that they drank, and the other things that were so natural, and yet these people were strong, and they didn't have all the maladies that we have today. And so I think that that's a very important thing. And we talked about humor, and I read to you from In the Garden with Jane Austen yesterday on how she said, I don't want to say your chicken is dead, but it's not alive, something like that. And then it reminded me of the life of Johnson, Boswell's Life of Johnson, which I couldn't find the book. I had laid it aside years ago, thought it was a valuable thing, but my children were too young to understand it, and it was a college level. And so I just kind of didn't look after it, don't know where it is, probably in one of the boxes somewhere. But it had a chapter on this man who was imprisoned, who was making sport of his jailer. And so we could laugh a lot at some of the things that happened to us just by having a sense of humor about everything. Now, I had talked to you about the injections, that everyone is pushing on everyone else and really pushing this injection thing. But I noticed really recently, when I had gone to look for something else, that the Russian Orthodox Church, now I'm not Russian Orthodox, but I have to say this was quite phenomenal. The Russian Orthodox Church declared that to take this injection would be harmful to the soul. And I thought, how can they say that? How can they do that? Well, if anything that's going to harm the body or make you sick, that you put in your body that's foreign, probably could harm the soul if it came to a point where it made you foggy in your thinking, and made your judgment difficult to make good judgments, and harmed your speech, or harmed your ability to do what was right. And at the same time, someone sent me the most astonishing email. Now, whether or not it's true, I don't know, but it was in a book. It's true that it is in a book. but it was something written in 1917 which said the time would come when mankind and these pharmaceutical companies would develop drugs that would make people so dull of thinking that they wouldn't even acknowledge their conscience, wouldn't even acknowledge the soul. So it is true that it probably, anything you take probably does have an effect on your ability to appeal to your soul, to your conscience. And we have known people, that have been on medications and they can barely function. They can't talk logically, and they lose their ability to care one way or another, whether right is right and wrong is wrong. So it may harm the soul. Some things do harm the soul. Poison is never good for you. And it may have an effect on how you behave, and then in turn may have an effect on your soul. I can't go too deep into it, but I thought it was quite admirable that this church, that the elders and the priests in this church said that their members should not take this injection because it would be harmful it would affect the soul. I thought that was real interesting. That'd be something to think about. Now, so I also noticed that in order to detox from the earthly problems, that we're also going to have to be busy and to read. Now, it's hard when you're under anxiety or under stress to focus on something and focus on the words. And I can remember, now who was it? It was in that movie and that book, Love Comes Softly by Jeanette Oak, and Marty was getting concerned because she was going to return to her home in the East when the spring came, and she actually had grown to like it in the West and like her little stepdaughter, and starting to adjust to the hardships there. And so she was getting ready to go in a few days, and she had a book in her hand, and she was reading it, and her husband said, "You haven't turned a page in over, an hour or something." And she said, "I can't seem to concentrate." And everybody knows what it's like when there's so much stress and such powerful decisions to be made, to look at a book and think, "I'll just forget about my worries now and I'll read a book," even the Bible. And you don't see the words, and you're stuck on the same sentence, and it never penetrates because of the blockage of this anxiety. So I find that it's better not to do that. It is probably better, and even prayers can be interrupted by terrible anxiety, and you can't concentrate on it. So what I have found the best thing to do is to clean out something. Go and rearrange something. Go and pull out all your stuff out of a drawer or a cabinet or a shelf, and go through it. There's always something like that to look after. Or sweep the floor. Or just wash something by hand. And I have seen people do this in the old days when there was a problem. The woman of the home would just go and fill the sink with water and start washing something. I'm trying to think of another scene that I saw in an old movie where someone was disturbed by some news, and she started just washing something and not really seeing what she was doing. And so but it does help. The movement helps to help alleviate stress. Now, your health is an obstacle to any enemy taking over your life, because if you have good health and you have a sound mind, and it's not fogged up by chemicals and pharmaceuticals, then you are a threat, because you can see through the lies. And I've told you about people who have this cognitive dissonance, where they are so used to thinking a certain way, and then someone presents them with a truth that doesn't quite match up to the way they think, and it just drives them. It's just like they're going to burst, because it's like they're going to blow up, because they don't want it. They don't want to look at that side of it. And I was watching some videos of what's going on in Australia, of course, because in the 60s, our family, my parents, moved us all there, and we were, what did you call permanent residents, and immigrants, landed immigrants. And so I've always been interested in what's going on there, and I found out something. It just occurred to me that, and I've been back several times to visit all of my siblings, and it just occurred to me that all the time I was there, and I knew this but hadn't really ever put it into words, is that the Australian people appeared to be very easygoing and laid back and not worried about anything. But it would be a mistake to push them too far because underneath all that easygoing laid backness and you know, enjoying the elements and the sun and the surf, underneath all that is a resolve of self-protection, and they are quite tough people. And so what's happening in Australia right now is that they have been pushed too far, and they're not going to put up with it. So but I don't feel sorry for the oppressors, because the Australians have put up with a lot and they're quite tolerant. But like I say, it's a mistake to push them too far. Now, those of you who carry the torch of freedom, you are aware of the tactics of anyone who tries to take away your freedom. And the Apostle Paul ran into that several times when he was carrying out his ministry and preaching the gospel. And when someone tried to stop him or block his way from one place to another, he'd find another way to go, because his loyalty was to his God first. And he said, when he was told not to talk any more about his religion to anyone, not to hold any more meetings, he said, we must obey God rather than man. And God, because of that, I think God gave him great victory. And so it reminds me of when my children were in homeschool. They studied the idea, the concept that one person, and in the home, you as mothers and homemakers and wives, one person, what a difference they can make. You don't think you're significant, but if you stop trying to be significant and just do the job, you'll find that you were very significant. And that we studied this idea of what one person can do. One mother taking her family aside and allowing the children to grow up naturally and to be educated at home makes such a difference, because of the influence and because of her children, what they turn out like and what they continue to influence into the next generation. And we studied we wanted to look at all the people in history and throughout the Bible when there was just one person who made a big difference. And starting with the Old Testament and going, starting with Abraham, one person, and then, you go on further down and there's Noah, and then there's on and on, Joseph, one person, and Daniel, one person, and of course with their friends, and just on and on, how one person, and there was a verse that my children just loved. It was something like 5 of you shall chase 100 and 10 of you 1,000, something like that. And it was along the lines of, if you will trust in the Lord and you will do what's right, then you will have, as a person, more influence and more power. And it's not like we are after wanting power all the time, but it is like we need strength, and it gives you strength when you do what's right. Remember Darcy in Pride and Prejudice. He said as a child he was given good principles, but he was left alone without good regulation, to apply them properly. And so I think that it's really important that when you're teaching, and I'm going to do some homeschooling to you pretty soon because this is education, your children, and they learn these wonderful principles, and they feel so enlightened and so even strengthened by some of the things that they learn, that you teach them not to be too uppity with them, not to push other people around or be arrogant or to boss others around because they're not doing it, because they're going to see a difference between themselves and other families in the world or other kids their age, even in church. So you have to remember what Darcy said. As a child, I was given good principles, but I didn't keep them under. I was left alone to pursue them, and I wasn't under good regulations. So we have to be very careful not to let your good principles, the good things that you're learning, create a conceit in you or create a self-righteousness in you. So let's go on now to the book called Beautiful Girlhood. And I was reading yesterday on the previous video to you about making friends with books. And I did warn you about bad books. And this section here does talk about that. So I probably should have just kept quiet and just finished reading it to you. So now this applies to boys too. So the boys can listen to this. So when I say every girl, or when I was as a girl, just you can substitute the word for yourself, boys. Okay, so here it is. Every girl likes, I may have read this previously, but I'm just going to preface it with this. Every girl likes in one way or another the social side of life, but going to the proper kind of authors, she may get glimpses of and even come into intimate acquaintance with the lives of the purest and noblest of earth. She can, through her book friends, converse with people of the highest and noblest ideas. Or she may seek out those whose lives are foul and bitter and enter with them into their dark deeds, smudging her young heart with the worst sins of the world. I believe every girl, now listen to this principle, it's very good. I believe every girl would be able to choose rightly if, when she begins a book, she would ask herself these questions. Would I like to read this book aloud to my mother? Would I feel honored in intimately knowing the people of this book in real life? Would pure society approve of the conduct of these characters? Can I profitably make my life pattern after the ideals I find here? Would the reading of this book help me to serve my Lord better? Now, in homeschooling, we had a book called Literature from the A. Becca Company, and they had a little guideline in the front of it that said that literature has to be regarded with the following questions in mind. Is it pure? Is it lovely? Is it good? Is it of good reputation, good report? Is it noble? Based on Philippians 4:8, whatever is good, lovely, pure, and of, strength, virtue. And so not just anything will do. In fact, there were some things that were called classics when I was growing up and I was in public school that I would never, ever have included in my literature, the literature curriculum of homeschooling, because of bad principles in there that, of course, I never saw when I was young, and until it was pointed out to me by these questions. Is it good? Is it lovely? Is it pure? Do the children respect and admire their parents? Or, does it make a hero out of the rebellious person who is destructive in his life or destructive to the family? And so many of the modern books did make you feel sorry for the person that was in the wrong. And so if these questions can be answered in the affirmative, then she may safely read the book. But if not, even though the book is very enticing, let her put it away, for it is poison to her soul. Now, you see, that goes along with what I was saying about that church I was telling you about that was saying that the drug was poison to your soul. The reading of love stories in which the lovers have secret meetings in dark and lonely places is detrimental to a girl of any age. They are good for no one. Also, horror stories that give real thrills and supply gory details of murder and crime are poison to the morals of young people. It is almost as bad to read such books as to make personal friends with people who live such lives. In both, you learn their thoughts and motives and will condone their wrongs if their personality has appealed to you. More or less, my young reader, you will be like these people whom you admire and to read aloud and to read about. Now, I warned you also, if you are watching Wives and Daughters with your children, to go through and explain who the characters are. You remember there was I've forgotten what it was. It was a British show that came on every week, and it was, goodness, I can't think of it. It's familiar to me from childhood on, and it started with Alistair Cook telling who the characters were and what one was prone to do and what the other was prone to do. And when Wives and Daughters first came on television as a series, he said, one girl, Cynthia, is prone to be light-hearted and careless with her youth and not sincere, and Molly, on the other hand, is more serious. You need to explain this stuff to the children before you allow them to watch it so they can know what to watch for in character. Otherwise, you'll get foolish young people who will say that they think Cynthia's actions were just more exciting and that they liked her better because she was prettier or because she had was more energetic, and Molly was so serious. And but we see what the end results were when you compare the two characters. Of course, Elizabeth Gaskell, she had a happy ending. She liked to make the characters all be reconciled and come together in the end in a happy family, so that's good. And but it's like this book says here, that these things, just because it looks like the personality of the person in the book is exciting, doesn't mean that it's good for you. You have to realize, it says here, horror stories are poison to the morals of young people. It says it's almost as bad to read books as to make personal friends with people who live such lives. Light, frivolous reading brings the brain into a condition where it is almost impossible for it to grasp and hold serious matter. When the girl who only reads serial novels undertakes to read anything that requires thought, she will at first not seem to comprehend a thing. That could be what's going on today, is that people have not been reading serious things and have not learned how to think. And I think it's really important when you start out teaching your children about literature or reading a story to them, that you tell them what's going on in the story and help them to think a little more deeply about it instead of just a story. Have a purpose. She will complain that the book is not interesting and see nothing in it, but let her keep at the more serious reading, going over it until she does understand it. She will in time become able to grasp most of the thoughts as she reads, and if she keeps on at the deeper reading, she will lose her appetite for the light stuff. It will seem to chaffy her and foolish to her. When you've decided, like one time I decided I was going to take 14 days and see if I could go without eating honey or sugar or anything sweet. And by the end of the 14 days, I didn't even want anything sweet. It was just too sweet for me. I could tolerate a piece of apple. But after that, it really helped me to focus more on foods that had more nutrition in them. And so it's the same with literature and with your pastimes and with the movies you watch. If you will watch more serious stuff, you'll lose your appetite for the light and fluffy brainless things. It will not hurt any girl to read a few stories. Good fiction is a moral teacher. It can teach us what to do in given circumstances. A lot of people wrote fiction because it was not going to be acceptable or politically correct to write the truth or a historical thing, that they would be banished or they would be jailed. I guess much like today, if they told the truth, so they wrote it in a fictional story to get the truth across. And Jesus used this method when he taught the parables. Those were earthly stories with a heavenly meaning, and they were directed at reluctant hearers to make them understand the principle underlying it. It shows us how the little faults and choices of the characters may be followed by dreadful consequences. That's just like in Wives and Daughters, where the choices that Cynthia made were drawing her deeper and deeper into trouble and to false friendships. The superior writers of fiction do their best to spare us these consequences in our own lives, yes. Much depends on their wisdom and insight to demonstrate right living. This is why a girl should, as a rule, become familiar with the classic literature and read only the best fiction. Now, I've warned you before about classic literature. It's not all good. It doesn't all have good principles. Some of it, okay. She who wishes to become educated and make her reading a means of culture must also select books that are more factual. Works of history, scientific achievement, and biographies of noteworthy people are all good. The reading of poetry is also good and gives us some of the finest commentary on life. Books of travel are very interesting, for they make one acquainted with the people of other lands. In the great field of choice, pick out those books, those friends, that will widen the outlook and lift up the standards of your life. Books that are helpful, are like helpful friends. Books can be a great blessing in the life of a girl, or they can become a curse. Which will you have them be in yours? Good books are among the best of companions, and by elevating the thoughts and aspirations, they act as preservatives against low associates. Now I'm going to go back to the book here that I love so much, Grammar and Composition. Before I got into homeschooling and got this Christian education book, I didn't like any of these subjects. But when I saw my children's eyes light up, and when I saw them take a page and just ponder on it and look at it, walk around with it, go to sleep with it, one of these books, I thought that I suddenly decided that the problem was not that grammar and composition is boring. It's just that when it's presented in a secular way from the state and the government in the public schools, it's going to only interest a few people, and a lot of people will fall through the cracks because they can't concentrate on it and it doesn't touch their hearts. But this is called using verb tenses. And I wanted to read the sentences that they use in here. And you're to identify the form of the verb, whether it's a verb tense, past tense, future tense, present tense, etc. I'm not so much interested in that as I am. Those things are good, though, because you can get people who are teaching the Bible wrong in order to make you go astray from the truth by misusing a tense. So that's why these things are really important, because you can read it for yourself and say, that was talking about past tense. That was talking about future tense. Future tense is very important. So these things are important. I'm not that good at it, but I liked the sentences. So I want to read these to you and ask you to think about how these affect you. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. He gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul. I will bless the Lord at all times. The waters had overwhelmed us. The stream had gone over our soul. When this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death has swallowed up in victory. Death is swallowed up in victory. The Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout. I have refrained my feet from every evil way that I might keep thy word. So I read these to you yesterday, but it just stood out to me a little bit more today, and I wanted to read them to you. And so now let us go on to some poetry. And I was going through my things and I found the Ideals magazine, Mother's Day from, I'm trying to think what year this was. It's very hard to find the year that this was written. I don't think you can get them anymore. I don't see the date on it. I just see a bunch of numbers but no date. Volume 52, number 3, February, March, May, June, September, November. Absolutely no year on it. But I found a poem that some of you who have children, little children, need to ponder on. So I'm going to read this to you. It's called Treasures. He brought me a leaf in his pudgy hand, a gift it was plain to see, and the joy that he gave was a gift of love, for he is a treasure to me. He brought me a feather, a rock, a flower, treasures to see and admire, and the smile on his face as he offered them was everything I could desire. He brings me more treasures each time he comes, a worm, a seed, or a bug, and the light in his eyes always sparkles with fun, and brings my response of a hug. God, lead him gently and teach him well. Through treasures you guide him to see, for the joy that he gives is a gift of love, because he is a treasure to me. You know, we take our children and grandchildren on nature walks, and I make little nature bags for them, and they're encouraged to pick up a cone, a leaf, a feather, a rock with a certain shape, and bring it in, and we put it in a little display bowl, and we make a big deal about it. And it's our decor. And I think it's really important. That poem is so sweet. I'll try to remember to type that out for you and put it on the post. Now I want to read to you out of this book called The Standard Book of Etiquette by Lillian Watson. Let me see if I got the right page here. I think I do. And this is all about behaving yourself at the table. And people aren't eating together anymore. They're not socializing as much, or even going to restaurants quite so much. And so it becomes very important to learn this for the home. At least we can have some protocol for the home. And so to make life more pleasant for each other. And one of the problems is if you're having problems at home, the solution is not to leave home. The solution is to learn how to overcome the problems, because you'll just run into the same problem somewhere else, with someone else, with maybe another family. And so, or your own family or your own marriage. So the best thing to do is stay home and overcome the problem instead of trying to get away, because probably what's happening is that you have a manner that is not good. You have bad manners. Someone is becoming irritated by it and trying to tell you about it. You're getting tired of hearing about it, so you just want to run. But the problem is not in, you're not going to be able to run away from it, because it will come up again. The best training is the home with your family. That is the best training. Bear in mind, let me just make sure I've got it here. Bear in mind that the dinner hour is not just a time for eating, but for social contact, for talking, exchanging opinions, sharing experiences, enjoying everyone's family and friends. One thing that I never liked is back in the olden days, sometimes someone at the dinner table would become a dictator and just constantly correct everybody to where pretty soon you couldn't even digest your food. Constantly correct everyone's conversation, constantly correct the way everyone was eating, constantly correct, so that dinner became a miserable time and people did not want to come to dinner. They wanted to eat alone somewhere. And isn't there a proverb about that? Better to eat some simple thing in peace than to have a feast in strife. And there are people that make even a tea party strife for you, where their conversation is not kind. It's um, constantly dominating and aggravating. And so be careful, if you're parents, to let your children enjoy their dinner hour. That doesn't mean, of course, that they aggravate one another, but in general, if it's not a terrible, terrible sin, just let it go. At a Always make a conscious effort to be good company at the table. Don't just sit and eat. Join in the conversation, but don't monopolize it. Save your best anecdotes, your most amusing jokes to tell when you are a dinner guest. Don't um, don't talk about unpleasant things at the table. Keep the conversation cheerful and entertaining. Food should be eaten in a leisurely matter-of-fact way with a certain fine disregard of it, as though it were merely an incidental to the conversation. It is all well and good to eat one's food with zest and pleasure, but there's a vast difference between the enjoyment of fine food and a mere greedy delight in eating. It is rather disgusting to sit at a dinner table with someone who's um, going on and on about the food and chewing out loud and saying, "Oh, this is so good. I want more, more, more," and then just focusing on the food. Now, of course, we are there to eat, but it's not a good idea to bring attention to yourself and just constantly talk about it. I know there are some cultures where you do not mention how much you like the food. It's not considered polite. You can quietly go to the cook later on and tell them, I think. The true sophisticate does not relish food for itself alone, but rather as the pleasant accompaniment of good talk and good company. That's true. That's a very interesting statement. It do you well to ponder on that for a while. There are, of course, a few basic details of eating etiquette which should be taught in the nursery, and which, through daily observance, should become as familiar and commonplace as one's own right hand. Do not try to talk when your mouth is full of food. Don't wave your fork or spoon in the air for emphasis. Don't tap on the edge of a glass or a plate, or click the salt cellars together, or play with silver. Don't reach in front of other people at the table. Don't blow noisily on the food to cool it. That'd be just spreading bacteria around, wouldn't it? Don't smack your lips or gulp food or make other unnecessary noises. Now, I can understand if you have a baby or a toddler, that won't be possible. Keep your lips closed as much as possible while chewing. Some people want to talk while they're eating, and so they will chew and talk, and someone will say, "Please don't chew with your mouth open," and they'll say, "Well, I have to breathe." But see, that's what you need to teach them something about anatomy there. You breathe through your nose. And, or I have to talk. That's just rebellion. Remember that noisy, untidy, greedy, careless, or hurried eating often offends the sensibilities of others at the table. It is not good manners to probe food carefully with your fork before eating it. That's clearly an affront to your hostess. I always was told when you sit down to the table, if you're just eating a sandwich and having a cup of tea, and children have to be taught this, don't open up the sandwich and investigate everything in it and start taking stuff out. That is something children do, I'm sure. And it's good to let them eat what they like and not make them eat what they don't like. But it's never good to open up a sandwich and take everything apart. If it's somebody's made it for you. So is tasting food and then pushing it aside, or seasoning it vigorously with salt and pepper, or showing in some other conspicuous way that you don't like it. Do you remember in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers when Millie was insulted because they wanted ketchup, tomato sauce, and she said, You don't need it because my stew stands on its own." She was such a good cook, and good cooks don't really like people to use condiments unless it's a hamburger. If you take a mouthful of food and discover that it's distasteful to you, swallow it anyway. It's offensive in the extreme to take it out with your fingers or to spit it out on a fork or in a corner of the napkin. The exception would be in family eating the children, the child, the real small child or the baby. You don't need to continue eating something you don't like, but neither do you need to make a face about it or expel the mouthful you have taken. We were taught you take your napkin, your paper napkin, and you just gently remove the food, and you don't let others see it. If you find something unpleasant in your food, don't draw everyone's attention to it. Why embarrass the hostess and spoil everyone's appetite? Don't you remember there was a cartoon going around in the 1950s? You oldies will remember this. Waiter, there's a fly in my soup. Be quiet, everybody will want one. The gracious way is to put your fork down quietly and engage in conversation to hide the fact that you are not eating. If you are also nauseated by what you find in the food, that you are unable to control yourself, leave the table at once and explain later that you felt suddenly ill, but it isn't necessary to explain why. Don't talk about your personal likes and dislikes in food. Well, you see, one of the things that came with this new nutrition movement, which I've always been into nutrition, but I noticed there was an attitude that came upon in the last 10 years where you could not sit down with a normal meal with anybody without them saying something about how bad this was for you and how bad that was for you. And even though we try to teach our children what about nutrition while they're eating it and why it's good for them, some of it was so obnoxious that you could hardly have a meal because they either wouldn't eat it, or if they were eating it, they were saying that this is full of this and this is full of that. And it would just be normal food, but they had investigated everything and they were frightened of it, frightened of everything. Well-bred people don't have pronounced food quirks. It was considered actually very feminine, and the men took it up too, though. It was considered kind of a weakling sort of feminine thing to have food allergies. You didn't say anything about it. A child might have food allergies, but a woman might say something, but a man would never, ever admit to having a food allergy. It was considered weak. So it says, well-bred people don't have pronounced food quirks, or at least they don't talk about them. They try to eat a little of everything that is served, but if it's something they thoroughly dislike or which disagrees with them, they just say no thank you and let it go at that. They don't follow with an elaborate account of their tastes and allergies. This was written in 1948, and we still have the same problem, so I think we'll just adopt this book as our contemporary etiquette book. We don't need to write a new one. This one's working just fine. However, it is not bad manners to talk about how delicious the food is, or how well prepared, how delightfully served. There isn't a hostess living who doesn't enjoy such compliments, but be brief about it. Don't enthuse to the point of sounding insincere. So, ladies, I hope that this has amused you for a while, and that you will take some time off and detox yourself from what the world is talking about, and delight in the fact that we have some good things going for us. We have our health, we have our humor, and there's good things going on in the world, and there are a few people who are making a big difference, and there's one that's chasing 100 and 10 that's chasing 1,000. And at home, you are the one that is creating generational values, because you're not just raising one generation. If you're living alone, you can still learn from this. And I have some ideas next time of how, if you're living alone, you can give yourself assignments and do things that have value and meaning to your life that may be influential to other people. So, ladies, I also hope that you will start a what they call an art journal, where you can write down your thoughts and paint a little picture to go with it, and start to really enjoy your life, and suffer from unbearable happiness, just like we spoke about last time. And in the meantime, till I see you again, find a few things to do that relax you, and go and look at the links that I left in the previous video in the post, and go and check those out and see what you can do if you have anxiety. So ladies, I want to thank you for your comments, and I want to thank those of you who are helping me and compensating me in so many ways, and for encouraging me. I really do appreciate it. And if you did not come here, I probably have 20 subscribers, but that's all I need. I only need as many people as I can sit in my front room and talk with. So I'm hoping that you will go to the page on which I have placed this video and leave your comment there. So I love you, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.